Crusaders, and welcome to the latest episode. My name's Sean Waskrug, and today we're going to be viewing my most anticipated film of 2022. We are talking about The Batman. This is a non-spoiler review for everyone who's wondering, because there's so much, though, about this movie. It's 3 hours long. There's so much to unpack. I pretty much had to write everything out so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say about this movie. So if it does look like I'm looking down a little bit, it's because I'm reading off my notes. Like I said, non-spoiler review. I'm going to go over elements of the movie. I'm going to go over the performances, action, all that kind of stuff. Whether or not we're going to be shooting a spoiler review, I had previously promised saying that Brian Michaels and myself were going to do one. After Brian saw the film, he doesn't know if he wants to do one, aka he was not a fan of the film. So we may not do a spoiler review. And if we do a spoiler review, it might just be me. But I feel like with what I've written here, I think I'm going to get most of what I want out of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. I've been pretty excited about this film ever since I saw the first trailer. And mainly it's because of what I've seen in the performances of how the Batman looks and how the Batman acts in the movie. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the characters one by one here. First things first, Batman. Robert Pattinson's portrayal of the Batman, to me, is the best Batman we've ever seen on screen. Pattinson plays the Batman in a way that we haven't yet seen on the big screen, and that is a vulnerable Batman. Yes, Christian Bale did this somewhat in the Nolanverse, but with Batman's portrayal, or Pattinson's portrayal, sorry, there's points in this film you will see the Batman get hurt. You will see it. You'll wince at the pain that the Batman feels in this movie. And what I love about Pattinson's portrayal of it is that you feel the pain that he goes through in this movie. When Batman is hurt, you feel his hurt. You see his anguish on his face. Whereas you didn't see that through Keaton, Bale a little bit, especially in Dark Knight Rises. But outside of that, you really never really saw that in, Kilmer and Affleck and all of them. They usually, play it stoic, like they're never hurt. But Pattinson's character, you do feel the pain in this movie. There's one particular scene, which is shot beautifully, where he does take a pretty rough ding, I'll say, and everyone in the theater was just like, "Oh my god!" And he doesn't get up quickly right away after, which is what I loved about it. I love seeing a Batman that's not invincible, and Pattinson's portrayal of that is incredible. I loved how he did this performance of the Batman. This is still a Batman though that is learning and has yet to perfect his craft. You find out very, very early in the film through his dialogue that we're in year 2 of the Batman, of doing his quest to save Gotham. And this Batman, especially from the very first 10 minutes of the movie, this is a Batman that is more about striking fear and beating up goons and less about capturing them and putting them in jail and getting them off the street. He just really wants to strike fear and beat the crap out of everybody and then just kind of leave. That's kind of the Batman that we are at least perceived to see from the beginning parts of the film. It's the journey of the story that we see with the Batman growing into starting to become the Batman that Gotham needs, and Pattinson does it to near perfection, at least in my eyes, of this film. Even if throughout the film he does go a little Bale in his Batman voice sometimes, but he does, for the most part, he's pretty understandable when he does his Batman voice. There's a little bit where you kind of feel a little Bale in it, but I feel like Pattinson does a fantastic job of portraying this version of the Batman, and to me, probably my favorite Batman to date. Like I said, everything about that performance I thought was great. On the other hand, his perception of Bruce Wayne is probably one of the weaker parts of the film. And it's not necessarily because Pattinson does a bad job. It's that Pattinson isn't really given a whole lot of time to be Bruce Wayne on screen. I would say you're looking at about 85% of this film is him dressed as Batman, and about 15, maybe even less % of him actually being Bruce Wayne on screen. Which, I mean, the problem with that is it doesn't give Pattinson enough time to establish this version of Bruce Wayne or to grow with the character through all the other Batmans, Keaton, Kilmer, not really Clooney, Bale, Affleck. They all tend to spend more time as Bruce and little screen time as Batman because you're establishing the character of Bruce Wayne. And this one's a completely different side of the coin, which most people might really, really like that. But for me, I feel like the character of Bruce Wayne is just as important as the character of Batman, and we get very, very little of Bruce Wayne in this film. What we do get to see of Pattinson's Bruce Wayne in this film is exactly what many people have been saying when they have seen pictures of Pattinson's Bruce or the trailers of Pattinson's Bruce, is that he looks like a whiny emo kid or like a crack addict is what my mom said. Bruce in this story for the most part is kind of this moody, looks kind of like he's a wet cat. Like he's just constantly looks like he's just drenched in sweat, which most of the time is because he had just taken off his Batman outfit. But frankly, for the most part, the Bruce Wayne in this is kind of an asshole, especially to Alfred, of all people. There are times in this movie where I just kind of wanted Alfred, played by Andy Serkis, to kind of just slap Bruce upside the head, because Bruce is just kind of a whiny brat in this movie. And I mean, I say brat, I don't mean like he acts childish by any means. He's at least, I think they say it's 20 years since the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne in the film, so he's got to be at least like between 25 and 30 in the film. But there's never a part of this movie that actually makes you like Pattinson as Bruce Wayne. And I feel like the film needed to have more time with him, even though he's probably like one of my least favorite parts of the film. I felt like the movie needed to give us more time with Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, so to establish his Bruce Wayne character a little more, so we can like him outside of being Batman. Because in this film, I love his Batman, but I hate his Bruce Wayne. And it's because the movie really doesn't give him enough time to breathe in that character. And frankly, I mean, that's going to probably be something they really, really need to establish in the second film and future on, is giving us more Bruce, so that way we can establish that character stronger with his already awesome Batman character. And because of that, Alfred, played by Andy Serkis, also is kind of not really utilized to the fullest potential of what Alfred should be used in these films. I love Andy Serkis. He's one of my favorite actors out there. I mean, his performance of Caesar in the Planet of the Apes films, and of course, Gollum / Smeagol in Lord of the Rings, are some of my best performances of all time. But most of his scenes are, like I said, basically him being talked down to by Bruce, and it's frustrating because what we do get of Serkis in the film is usually him trying to help Bruce out, and sometimes figuring stuff out for Bruce that Bruce just doesn't see. And instead of Bruce acknowledging Alfred, saying good job, he just kind of feels almost kind of like a disgruntled teenager, that he's annoyed that Alfred figured it out and he didn't. And because of that, I feel like the Andy Serkis character really kind of gets pushed to the side, and his character to me is way too important, and the Alfred character in general is way too important to the franchise for him not to be important. Now, in the third, near almost the end of the second act, going to the third act, there is a moment with Alfred that we do get to see, that we finally get to see some great Andy Serkis performances in the film, and I hope because of the way the storyline went with this, we're going to get a lot more of Serkis in the future, especially with Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, to, once again, establish these characters a lot stronger and a lot better. We know Pattinson's a great actor, we know Andy Serkis is a great actor, but we need to see it as these two characters on screen, rather than just Batman and Alfred. Now going off to probably one of the more talked about performances, and that is Paul Dano's The Riddler. This part of the movie for me is kind of my love-hate relationship with the film. I love Paul Dano's performance for the most part, as he's basically kind of like a Jigsaw-esque type maniac. A lot of people will connect him to Saw, especially because of a few scenes in this movie, or even Seven. I go more towards the Saw aspect of it than the Seven aspect of it. And when we finally do get an unmasking of Paul Dano, which we've seen in the trailers already, the scene with Batman and the Riddler talking, kind of like it's not really an interrogation, it's kind of them just talking while he's in Arkham, which, once again, it's in the trailers, I'm not spoiling anything. It's a really, really, really good scene. Even if they're trying their best to try to outdo Christian Bale and Heath Ledger's Batman Joker interrogation in Dark Knight, which they never will. It's nowhere near that caliber, but I can see them trying to do something to that respect. It's still a very solid scene, but you're never going to top that scene as one of the best scenes in Batman movie history. It's a very well done scene, but it's almost like in the scene, Paul Dano's Riddler, he's so clever, he's so smart, but then when things don't start to go his way, he kind of loses his mind in a sense, almost kind of like his performance in Prisoners, where he plays a very special kind of character, and he does this in certain parts of the film, which really kind of turns me off on Paul Dano's Riddler character. When they let Paul Dano just do his dialogue and do his scenes, I think Paul Dano does a fantastic job. It's when they kind of try to do this crying, wailing, demented kind of character is where they lose me overall with Dano. Now, while I do love what Dano does with the Riddler character in this film, I just didn't love it as the Riddler. Had he been another character, like Hush, for example, or someone else in the Batman Rogues Gallery, I probably would have loved this performance a lot more. But for it being the actual Riddler himself, that's where it kind of lost me because I don't see the Riddler as this kind of character. And I know they're trying to do a brand new, unique kind of twist on it, but it doesn't hit for me the way it should as him being the Riddler. Had he been any other character, I think this character would have worked so much better. I think Dano's performance would have hit a lot stronger for me if he just wasn't the Riddler. The riddles themselves, I mean, they weren't really that hard. Batman tends to solve them in mere seconds, which makes it seem more like this is a person that's trying to be like the Riddler and less like being the actual Riddler themselves. This is really a situation where Matt Reeves and the writers really should have just gone with more of a lesser-known villain for the role than just the Riddler themselves. But a lot of people are loving the performance of Dano in this film, so maybe I'm more in the minority of that. But that is the one big miss for me in the Riddler, was just when Paul Dano kind of overdid the character himself. Going on to Catwoman, Zoe Kravitz puts on a very solid performance as Selina Kyle. She's never named Catwoman in the film, so this is just her mainly more as just Selina in the film. They definitely treat Selina as more of a straight up a straight up ally to Batman in this film. And less as a foil that goes along the lines of what they did with like Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises, and less like a good guy or good girl bad girl situation like Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. I do think that in the portrayal that Zoe Kravitz does in the film and the story plot they give her in this, she does do a better job of being that ally and kind of a good version of Selina Kyle that I think they really wanted to do with Anne Hathaway in Dark Knight Rises, but it really just didn't hit as well. I think Zoe Kravitz does a very, very good job of being able to do this. There are certain scenes with her performances up against Batman in the movie where I'm like, Zoe Kravitz is killing the scene. She really is killing the scene. And she's killing it in a way that I would go back and think of Anne Hathaway's performance going, this is kind of what we needed from Anne, and we never really got that from her in Dark Knight Rises. When we do actually get to see Catwoman be Catwoman-esque, her fight sequences, I think, work really well. She does some really good action sequences when fighting goons. And the one cat burglar scene we actually do get to see of her in the film, I think was a really nice touch. I just wish we would have gotten more of that. The story of Selina seems more like the beginning of the Catwoman, like I said, that we will see in potential future installments, and someone that could become a foil for Batman more as the woman that got away and less like a villain that he doesn't know or if he can trust in general. The chemistry between Selina and Batman is solid and believable to a point, but with absolutely zero interaction between Selina and Bruce in the film, because there's never a moment in this movie where Selina and Bruce are ever on screen together. It's always Batman and Selina. It really hurts the relationship for me in my eyes. It feels more like something. It doesn't feel like a real relationship or a real potential chemistry of a relationship. It feels more like an adrenaline rush of lust between two people who are working with each other in dangerous situations, and that's something they probably could have done a little bit better job of throughout the movie had they maybe established the Bruce character a little bit better and allowed Selina and Bruce's character to cross paths instead of it just being Selina and Batman. Penguin, the unrecognizable Colin Farrell. Everyone who doesn't know Colin Farrell is in this movie are not going to know that this is Colin Farrell going into the film. He puts on a decent performance in the movie overall, but he really isn't given too much to do outside of mostly just being a number 2 guy to Falcone, who's basically just lying in wait to take over as Gotham's number 1 crime boss. The best part of Farrell's performance comes in about the middle of the film with a chase interrogation scene with the Batman. The only negative I saw in Farrell's performance overall is that he tends to seem to be doing his best Robert De Niro impression throughout the film. There's a few times in the movie where I was kind of taken aback because I was like, I feel like he's just trying to do De Niro. It's not bad, but it just took me out of the moment a couple of times, and that could just because the makeup maybe looks him a little more like De Niro than obviously Colin Farrell. But maybe in future installments of the films, because we do know that they're doing some spin-off stuff with the Penguin, he can kind of flesh out his role a bit better and kind of add some more uniquenesses to the character to feel more like the actual Penguin should be than just a goon who kind of is doing a Robert De Niro impression. To me, my favorite performance of the film, hands down, has to go to Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner, or he's not Commissioner Gordon, he's just Detective Gordon for the most part in this film. I think Jeffrey Wright does a fantastic job as Gordon. Most of my favorite parts of this film, aside from the action scenes, was watching Batman and Gordon work together. It's this relationship that really makes or breaks the Batman film as a whole. Wright's Gordon consistently is going under scrutiny for citing and helping the Batman, especially in the face of many of the Gotham PD people who are under him and above him. And without no unwavering does he ever go against, in his eyes, the only man he can trust in corrupted Gotham, which is the Batman. And I love pretty much every interaction that Wright and Pattinson have together in this film. I wish we could have seen more or heard more in the dialogue that led us to see why Gordon trusts the Batman so much. As you know, this seems to be an already a very much established relationship between the two when we start in this film, and I would have kind of wanted to hear or see why Gordon trusts Batman so much. Gary Oldman put on a great performance as Gordon in the Nolan trilogy, but after one film, I think Jeffrey Wright is ranked right up there as one of, if not the best Gordon performance we have seen so far, and I cannot wait to see more of what Wright and Pattinson do together as Gordon and Batman in future installments. In terms of other performances, you got John Turturro. He does a solid job as Carmine Falcone. I normally judge Turturro pretty harshly, but I actually enjoyed his more confident, calm approach to Falcone in this movie over his normal, over-the-top yelling performances that I've seen in Adam Sandler movies and Transformers and other performances that Turturro does. I actually thought he did a pretty solid job as Falcone in this. Peter Sarsgaard does a solid job as District Attorney Gil Colson. He kind of portrays it in an almost like unconfident loser type of way, and I think he does a solid job in the scenes that he's in for the film overall. To me, the biggest problem and the most eye-rolling part of this film for me was pretty much anyone who played a Gotham PD police officer. They are over the top, playing like cartoony caricatures of what an idiot bad cop should be like. Their dialogue is cringy through most of the film. Sometimes they're just like, I'm going to be a tough guy and talk bad to Batman, or I'm just a blatant idiot who doesn't know what to do, and it's just, they take me out of every scene that they're in, and there's so many times where we're getting these great scenes with Gordon and Batman, and they almost get ruined because a Gotham PD police officer comes in and just ruins the scene or tries to chime in with a line, and you just want them to shut up and just be like basically background settings. Like, don't interrupt the two good performances, just be quiet. They don't do it too much, but they tend to always get at least one, if not two lines in on every scene, and most of the time they're either overacted or they're just badly worded dialogue or badly performed dialogue by pretty much anyone who plays a cop in this film, not named Jeffrey Wright. And it's because of those that just kind of took me out of almost every scene they were in, but nonetheless, it didn't take away from the movie, but each time I was just like, just stop talking. In terms of the movie's length, with the film running almost 3 hours, a lot of the film is going to be, or a lot of people are going to be wondering, is there any points that drag the film down? The honest answer is yes and no. There are, at least for the movie's first hour, it definitely is a very slow burn as it's kind of setting up the world of Gotham and for the new franchise, because this is definitely a Gotham that's not like the other Gothams that we have seen in previous films. It's also kind of establishing, you know, how well we know how the police handles Gotham in this world and how they handle the Batman and how the Batman handles the criminals. And most of the slower parts of the actual film itself does kind of revolve around the Selina's plot storyline or whenever Bruce Wayne's on screen. But problem is that we kind of need those moments on this to establish character between Selina and Bruce. So you kind of have to take the slow parts with the film as a whole. So in terms of the 3 hour runtime, there are certain times where I was kind of thinking, okay, we got to be around 2 hours. We got to probably have an hour left, or oh, we got probably about 30 minutes left of the movie. But there was never a time where I was watching this movie where I was thinking, oh God, please let this movie end. I'm ready to be done. I was definitely enthralled with the world that I was seeing, and I was excited to watch every minute of it. But for people who are bringing like kids to this movie because it's Batman, this is definitely more an adult Batman. You got some cuss words, you got some kind of gory details and gory descriptions of some deaths in the film. I'm not saying this is going to scare kids by any means, but the Riddler can come off as a very scary character on screen. But for the most part, because of the slowing methodicalness of this being more of a mystery crime noir, this is definitely a movie that kids are probably going to find frustrating to sit through and watch. And because of that, you may not want to take kids to see the Batman. You might want to wait for them to get home or watch it at home when it goes on digital. Because I do find them getting very kind of agitated with it. Because while the action scenes are fun, I don't think it's going to keep the kids' attention for 3 hours. The story itself, to me, this is probably one of my favorite aspects of the film, and I think this is also going to lie in where a lot of people might love or hate this movie as a whole. Um, this movie feels the most like a video game than I've ever seen in a lot of ways. The first act of this film establishes the world, its characters, and along the way you're given the main quest of the story like a video game. And for anyone who doesn't play video games, this is probably going to get lost on a lot of you. For a lot of people who play video games like Uncharted, The Last of Us, God of War, Horizon, Zero Dawn, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. The first act, like I said, you're given the main quest. Stop the Riddler. Find who the Riddler is, stop the Riddler. But you're also, throughout this main story, you're going to be given side quests, or there's going to be side quests that are going to pop up in the story with characters that you're going to get introduced to, and Batman's going to talk to, and Batman's going to get to know, and Batman's going to go to different parts of Gotham that are going to become kind of stationary parts of the movie. And there's going to be certain scenes that feel like they kind of are putting a hold on the main quest and kind of just deviating away to play a side quest. And then there are other times where there's certain dialogue that's dropped in the movie that you're like, oh, that's going to be important later in the film, or that's going to be important coming up here in the film. But it's almost like a side quest where someone's trying to get you to do it, and you decide to just bypass it and continue with the main story, and then it's never brought up again. And that's what kind of happens with the story. I actually like that in a way. Now, yes, there are some story elements where I'm like, well, that seemed rather important. Why didn't they bring it back up? It's because it wasn't a main part to the main story. It might be something that might be a main part later down the road in future installments, but it didn't necessarily need to be dropped in this film, but it definitely made it feel more like a world of Gotham than just kind of this linear straight story, which I liked that aspect. Like I say, it's a very open world kind of video game aesthetic to the film. Gotham definitely feels like a world, or at least a very busy city in this town, and any given moment Batman could run into somebody or run into an establishment, meet certain characters, and it could lead to different stories throughout the film, which I actually like that aesthetic. But for people who just want kind of more of a straightforward story, you might find that annoying, and I think might be probably one of the main reasons why Brian didn't like the movie. But to me, I like that. I also thought the fight scenes themselves felt like a lot of action set pieces in video games where you have a bunch of goons and Batman just takes out the goons, like in the Arkham franchise. They were fun to watch, just like they're fun to play in the video games. And I also felt like Batman's detective work in the movie feels a lot like a player rummaging through a room, clicking on everything that's highlighted to try to figure out one of the clues for the movie/game. Which for me as a gamer is a huge plus, because I'm one of those gamers that will literally stay in a room and like scan everything and try to divulge as much information as I can to try to solve the game or gain XP points or stuff like that. And that's what I love about this Batman. This is definitely the best detective version Batman that we've gotten in any film before. You are actually watching a Batman going through the motions, trying to decipher and figure stuff out, staying in the room, looking at clues, looking through files, looking at little pieces here and there that might not look important at first, but then later in the film start to become bigger nuggets as they go through. And you're starting to see the detective aspects of the Batman in this game, much like a video game. And that's what I really, really loved up to this point. Now, if you're a type of gamer who doesn't like that kind of stuff, and who just will skip the cutscenes just so they can get to the next action sequence, that might be a reason why you might like the story of the Batman that much. If you love the full world building of everything and kind of searching through stuff like you would in a video game. I think that's why you're going to like the story of the Batman that much more. I know I kind of just went on a little bit of a tangent there with video games, but to me, that's what I felt like the Batman story elements were very much like an Arkham City game, than more so like a straightforward movie. In terms of the direction and cinematography, Matt Reeves and Greg Fraser, I both think do a fantastic job of shooting this film and making Gotham feel like a real city. Whether it's the color palette of blacks and blood red, mixed with making Gotham look dark and gloomy, to wondering why anyone would ever live there, to then on the other side of town making it feel like almost like New York, where it's full of life and heavily populated. They do a great job of establishing, like I said, Gotham as like its own world. You have different parts of the city that have different types of characters, different kinds of clientele in terms of, you know, the poor, the rich, the criminal, the kind of the people who are more or less probably going to get attacked by the criminals, to the police departments, to even Gotham in general in terms of the Waynes and how they're prescribed, and how most of the time this film is running around a political campaign for mayor. I feel like the shots of Greg Fraser for cinematography and Matt Reeves do a fantastic job of making you feel alive with this world. A lot of the Riddler's attacks in this film are some of the most awesome shots. There's the first introduction of the Riddler in this movie is amazing. I love the way it was shot. It actually caused a couple people in my theater to jump. And a lot of the Joker's attacks in this film I thought were shot beautifully, to the point where you never knew where the Riddler was lurking and that he might come out and attack you at any moment. A lot like a horror character would, like Freddy Krueger, Jason, or Michael Myers. Even with the Batman, they establish in the film with a lot of criminals that a lot of them are scared to walk down dark alleyways because they're afraid of the Batman walking out. And when the Batman does walk out, it's awesome. It's chilling to watch the Batman, almost kind of like this old, you know, Western guy walking through a saloon. You hear him coming through the dark path and you're just waiting for him to emerge. And the way they shoot that is beautifully well done. Which brings us into, you know, the action aspect of it. The way the action is shot in this film is awesome. It's brutal. It's painful. It's bone crunching. Whenever you watch it, it is a lot like a Batman Arkham game. And I think it's the best version of Batman fighting in any Batman film, because it's like that. I mean, we did get Ben Affleck in BVS doing that warehouse scene, which was a great scene, but that was one scene out of like 2 movies with the Justice League that we actually got of that. This movie, every action sequence is Batman just brutally destroying people and him getting kind of attacked by 20 people sometimes at once. And a lot of it, like I said earlier, is you see the pain that Batman goes through fighting these guys, and you can believe the pain, and you can also believe the pain that he dishes out on the villains as well. I love the way it's shot. There are some great scenes with him, like sequences of him fighting that you would like see on something like the hallway scene from Daredevil that a lot of people love. There are some beautiful set pieces, action set pieces that I could just sit and watch on replay. I love them so much. And then there's also the big chase sequence that you see in the trailer between Penguin and the Batman, with the Batmobile. That is an awesome chase sequence. It's quick, it's flashy, it's not over the top in any ways, except for probably the very final part of it. But the element that I like in the way that they shot this thing is they put you in the eyes of the Penguin. They made you feel what it was like to be chased by Batman in this movie, which is definitely a different spin on things, because we're usually always watching Batman chase somebody and watching it through his eyes, and we do get that a little bit in the sequence, but to flip the page and watching you as the villain, seeing what they see through their eyes when someone like the Batman is chasing you, was definitely a beautiful twist, and I love the way they shot that overall. In terms of the movie as a whole, I can see a lot of people are going to love this movie, and I see a lot of people who are going to downright hate this movie. For me personally, I really enjoyed the Batman as a whole. I really had a lot of fun watching this. It's not a perfect movie. It's not even the best Batman. I still think The Dark Knight is the best film overall, and a lot of that hinges on the amazing performance of Heath Ledger. But as a whole, this is probably, for me, the best version of the Batman that we've gotten. Not the best Bruce Wayne, but the best Batman version. I love how Matthew Reeves and Greg Fraser shot Gotham in this film. I love the film noir, or crime noir aspect of it. I love the grittiness of it. I love how the Riddler, while yes, I have my issues with the Riddler, I love this, like, kind of the Saw mystery aspect of it that we got throughout this film. I love the way that we shot that part. The brutality of the action sequences were great. The 3-hour runtime, it's not ideal for every movie, but the 3-hour runtime didn't bother me. It might bother some. Also, for people who are wondering, is there any post-credit, mid-credit scenes? Not really. There is something at the very end credits, but it's really not important for you to stay. It's really not something that you're gonna sit through the whole credits and you're gonna go, I waited for that. It's really not important. They do leave some kind of tail end performances for something towards future installments. The one person that I saw of that, I really kind of hope that they go a different route with it. But I have been wrong in terms of casting before, so maybe they'll surprise me. But overall, I think The Batman is an incredibly well done film. I think Matt Reeves had a lot of expectations riding on his shoulders to make The Batman a great film, which that's like that for any director who takes on The Batman. And I think for the most part, he did a great job. The movie's not perfect. It's got its issues, but it's stuff that can be easily fixed going into the next installments. For me, obviously, it's a high recommendation. If you're a fan of The Batman or any of the movies in general, you're probably going to check this movie out anyway. If you're not a fan of The Batman and you're wondering, are you going to enjoy this film? If you're looking for more of a darker, grittier version of Batman than what we've gotten in past, then this movie's going to work for you. If you like that crime, mystery, noir aspect of the movie where the story is more about the world surrounding Batman instead of more of a straight linear story, I think you're going to enjoy this. If you're wanting more of that straight linear story, you might have some issues with the film overall, but I think for the most part, most people are going to enjoy this film. For me, I'm going to give this a straight up 90%. Like I said, I love most of it. It's not perfect, but I think most people are going to enjoy this film overall. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up with the Movie Crusaders. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, we may or may not have a spoiler review for this. A lot of it depends on Brian and whether or not he actually wants to shoot it, because I know he was not a fan of the film. But if we decide to do it, we'll shoot that. If not, we'll be back next week for our actor, actress, director showcase, where we'll be talking about Bruce Willis, Sandra Bullock, and Edgar Wright. And then following week, we will also have our Weekend Crusaders award show, where Brian and I discuss our favorite films, performances, and moments of 2021. And then at the end of the month, we will have our Movie Crusaders Oscars, where we talk about our predictions and who we would have put in for the Oscar for the Best Pictures, Best Actor, Actress, Supporting Actress, Supporting Actor, all those, plus all the other reviews we got for all the other movies as well. But yeah, until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.